Okay, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. Can you hear me, Dr. Abdul Rahman? Is it
Yes,
okay?
Prof.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. By right, we should start the class at 2. I'm not really sure what happened to you, whether you could not connect or what. All right. So this class is I try to record, so whether it is working or not, because normally we use WebEx, but now we change it to Google Meet, which I'm not really familiar anyway. All right. Now let's go into the slide. Okay, now we are into course learning outcome number 2, CLO2. Okay, as I already mentioned to you, we finished CLO1 last week. Now we are going into CLO2 related to planning and scheduling. Okay, I did revise this slide from the previous slide. Well, we can go into this slide again one more time in case you miss, because this slide is very important where planning is there. I already mentioned to you in the at the center of this what we call figure is the project requirement or project objective. To simplify, we can basically just put triple constraint, namely time, cost, and quality. We can replace with the model by PMI, or we can replace with, I normally like to draw this figure. Time, scope, time, cost, quality is here, safety and health, environment, and contract. So this is what we call project requirement. When we execute a project, people expect us to fulfill the scope, time, cost, etc., etc. Then only both parties will be very satisfactory, namely client and the contractor. But of course, in order to execute the project, we need 5 M's, resources. Those 5 M's is not going to be basically standalone. We need to use a mechanism, okay, a management mechanism. We normally call it management process, namely planning, organizing, leading, directing, staffing, communicating, etc., etc., etc. We do not go into detail with regard to leading, directing, staffing, communicating, because that topic by itself is very big. If, for instance, you go for master classes, either in project management or construction management, etc., etc., you will learn about communication itself in one whole class. There could be class about organization itself. You see, this kind of thing is very big, but we just simply touch bit here and there in the previous slide. We even have organizing as one lecture previously given by Dr. Abdul Rahman. And now, see, we are going to focus on planning and scheduling. That would be the center of this subject. We stress more on planning and scheduling. Project management knowledge. Normally, in order to become professional in whatever field, we basically need to refer to the bodies, professional bodies. So in this world, we do have many professional bodies. And for the project management, we can refer to Project Management Institute based in US, but it is worldwide recognized. They do have project management professional in UK, even in Malaysia, etc., etc. But one of the biggest organization would be PMI, Project Management Institute. Project Management Institute do basically come out with PM BOK. This is what we call PM BOK. This is the sixth version, the sixth edition. They did come out with the seventh edition a few years back. Okay, I think it was blue in color, but never mind. The whole idea is basically to tell you project management knowledge area. This is what we call knowledge area. So in order to be well versed in project management, or later on, might not be immediately, you are not going to get involved with project management as a professional project manager yet, but somehow along the line, you will be basically involved in some kind of management input or output. So that's why you need to know a little bit here and there. So under project management knowledge area, there are 10 knowledge areas, and one of them is listed there, time. Or nowadays they use schedule instead of time management. They use schedule management. Why? Because managing time is quite abstract. Instead of putting time, they put into schedule, so that schedule can be basically measured. But overall, that is what we call time related to time issues. Okay, so planning and scheduling is basically related to time. So that is where basically the planning scheduling basically originate or related to the whole project management body of knowledge. And under those areas, remember, the area are 10. They could be scope, they could be schedule itself is basically related to the one that we are discussing. Then they could be cost, they could be quality, they could be many, many things. And you notice each of those knowledge area, they are planning inside those things. So that's why planning is needed everywhere. Everything that you do, either you are doing communication, you need to come up with a plan, communication plan, they call it communication plan. When you do scope, there is a planning for the scope. When you are doing some kind of cost estimating, etc., or cost management, you need to do cost planning. When you do resource, and of course, planning is will be much more exaggerated in resource planning. When we talk about risk itself, planning is there also, procurement, etc., etc. So everything basically need planning. If we go for a simplified version of project management process instead of looking at this thing, there are many things. We go for the a few key management process, namely initiating. You see, planning is there. Planning is always there. And then after we plan, we are going to execute, monitor, and then close. And this is what the figure looks like. But if you look at this figure, people might confuse a little bit in terms of thinking that planning, after plan, then we execute. After execute, then we are going to monitor. So it looks like after finishing the execution, then only we are going to monitor. Whereas in reality, this could be a better diagram. This is a better diagram. Because why? Because if we execute everything first, then only we are going to start the monitoring. It is too late already. We are going to get the result, and then the result will show something, and then we are going to do correction. How are you going to correct everything already completed, especially construction? You cannot basically demolish and reconstruct things, which could be very costly anyway. So that's why, in reality, this is what the diagram looks like. Initiation is one thing, then you plan, then you execute, The, this execution meaning to say you are going to execute bit by bit, okay, bit by bit. And then after you execute a big, a small portion of the things, then you are going to do the monitoring in the subsequent week, for instance. Then you are going to get the result. Then you are going to take action and then go back to the drawing board, go back to the planning, and then recalibrate, fine tuning, and put into the execution for the following weeks. And this cycle will go on and on and on and on until the project basically complete. So meaning to say, the lesson learned is going to take place along the way before the project fully completed. From that concept, then only you can improve something, okay? Because in construction, we don't have the luxury of making errors. Errors will result in a costly mistake. The whole building could collapse, for instance. So who is going to bear the cost? So that is the issue. Planning and scheduling. What is planning scheduling? Planning scheduling provide a project, a plan, a schedule that is essential in project time management. Remember, there are 10 knowledge area. One of them is basically time, which subsequently Project Management Institute changed to schedule, okay, in order to to uh, to make things which is more measurable, more measurable. All right, scope of project time management. Scope of project time management, okay. Planning, there are 3 items here: planning, scheduling, tracking, and controlling. 3 items, okay? Planning, scheduling, tracking, and control. I will explain bit by bit, okay? Let me go back to this. All right. Scope of time, project time management, planning, scheduling, and tracking. You notice that we always use the term planning and scheduling. It is like monitoring and control. There are a few terms that people always use together, okay? Even though sometimes people just simply skip, instead of saying planning, scheduling, they might basically say planning, or they might say basically scheduling. Or sometimes you might hear people say controlling, or simply they say monitoring. But both terms, actually, in order to make it complete, are interrelated, except that in normal way, people would basically simplify the communication anyway, okay? But if we want to split into each item, planning is a thinking process, is the overall thinking process in order for us to basically come up with what to do, okay? So that's why the whole element here, planning, scheduling, okay? Planning and scheduling, let's go back. Let's go back into this one. Sorry. Okay, the whole thing here basically involve what we call 5W plus 1H. W involve what to do, where, who is going to be involved. So the overall thinking process. Normally, when we do planning, it is something which is not there yet. So there are elements of forecasting a little bit involved here, because normally we plan something which is not there yet, meaning to say we plan something for the future. So there could be some kind of element forecasting based on whatever data. So that's why we can expect that there is no such thing as a perfect plan, okay? But it's okay. And then H is basically how we execute things. So that will be the planning and scheduling aspect. And the last one, tracking and controlling. The word tracking is normally used in project scheduling, normally, but the tracking basically refers to monitoring. Remember in our slide here, remember there is monitoring and controlling. Where is it in scheduling that mentioned those things? Here, the third item. So project time management basically involve what? Planning and then scheduling and then monitoring and control. Instead of saying monitoring, in scheduling, even the software basically use the term tracking. So don't basically get confused what is tracking is all about. Tracking basically is very similar to monitoring, but instead of saying monitoring, you use the word tracking. Okay, planning and scheduling is needed for what? For what purpose? Well, tracking and controlling is basically the fundamental or the main usage of the planning scheduling. Okay, for instance, let's take a look at a few figure after this in order to demonstrate this issue. Okay, this one. We are going to learn this thing in subsequent slide anyway, but since this is the introduction, so basically we are going to relate to others anyway. Okay, example. This is what we call bar chart. At the end of this CLO learning session, by right, you should be able to draw the bar chart also. In CLO2, we are going to learn, for instance, how to develop the, basically we call it tasks. Where do tasks come from? From the exercise of what we call WBS, work breakdown structure. Okay, work breakdown structure. All right. And then we get this list of activity or tasks. Then duration. Later on, we are going to learn how to come up with the duration from the concept of productivity calculation. Then another thing, one more thing, which is not here in this table anyway, we call it predecessor. Predecessor is basically the interrelationship between one activity and another. For instance, activity G, what happened after activity G completed? From this diagram, it looks like H will basically immediately start. And then it looks like activity I will also start after G, but slightly will be delayed by perhaps half a day, no, half a week, for instance. And that is what we call interdependent. And normally we are going to fill up this with this information. And the whole thing here, this is what we are going to learn in CLO number 2. Until that extent only. From this information, basically we can draw this diagram using either Gantt chart or later on AOA diagram, and then subsequently the PDM diagram, the more basically complicated and the more famous one that being used nowadays. Okay, so that is the extent of CLO2. But then later on, after the semester break, we are going to continue with CLO3. What does CLO3 mean? Remember, resource management. Resource management is once we start inputting the resource. This is just example. Let's say instead of inputting data until column 1, 2, 3 only, now let's go into column 4. Once we go into column 4, then only we are going to get extra information. What are the information? For instance, oh, it looks like activity G is going to use 5 people. Then activity 2 is going to use 8 people. So we can plot what we call resource graph. This is what we call resource graph. And this resource graph we are going to learn in one of the topic. We call it resource smoothing and leveling. Okay, let's tabulate this graph. 5. This is 8. This is 9. If you add this thing together, this is 7. This is 3, and then this 3. So this is what the resource graph looks like. And we want the resource graph looks like this. We need to say there is a progressive increase of resources, and then there is a peak, and then there is a gradual decrease of resources. This is what we call a good looking graph. But the issue is that sometimes after we do the planning, because we cannot see until we input the resources and plot the graph, then only we can see. The resources could look like this. Could look like this. You see? Up and down, up and down, up and down. This is very bad looking graph. Why this is bad looking graph? For instance, if you have 5 number of people on the first week, and then 10 people on the second week, and then another 5 on the third week, and then you come into 15 on the fourth week, and then into 8, etc., etc. Variation of people. Okay, so you are going to notice that from first week into second week, it is okay. You can basically plan for resources. But what happened into the third week? So it looks like you only need 5 people from the original, from the second week of 10 people. Where are you going to put another 5 people? Are you going to tell the workers, okay, now you can work from home? What are you going to do? I don't know. You can watch YouTube looking at how people plaster things, mixing the concrete, etc., etc. Well, if you are professional, you can work from home, and then people still pay you salary. But in reality, construction workers are not going to be apply the same situation anyway. Even in reality, if you are not feeling well, you want to take MC, okay, but you can go ahead and leave, taking sick leave, whatever thing, but your salary will be deducted. Some company do that. You see, if you do not come to work, then there is no money. As simple as that. So that basically will demoralize the workers. So if you see this kind of situation, remember, scheduling, you are the one that come up with the scheduling. Can you do something? So that's why being a scheduler or planner, it is not an easy task. You must basically come up with a proper scheduling, planning, but at the same time, it must be very realistic, taking into account many, many things. So this is example of the purpose of tracking, controlling, etc., etc. The third item here, the third item there, okay? Especially this basically will reflect the graph that we basically mentioned. Later on, we are going to learn, but now we just introduce the usage of planning scheduling. Okay, next. All right. Okay, this is another example from the same point. Let's say we already know activity A and then duration, then we can only come up with the cost. How do we calculate cost or estimate cost? You have learned in some of the previous classes, estimating, etc., etc. And if you have done your IDP 1, perhaps you can still remember one of your project is basically to estimate but you do not estimate the whole thing. You just estimate the earthwork. By right, everything has to be estimated. Everything that you put in on your drawing, on your piece of land, you say you want to develop road, sewerage system, drainage, pipeline, whatever, house, buildings, everything has to be estimated in terms of the cost. In Malaysia, we are very lucky because we do have uh, quantity surveyor, so we might pass basically the buck to them. They are better off in doing those kind of things. But as a civil engineer, you have learned the basic. Remember, not all construction project, construction organization do hire quantity surveyor. Small and medium price and medium enterprise project basically do not have the QS around. So you as engineer, you are the one that going to take care of those things. So that's why you learn a little bit about quantity surveying and try to estimate what is the purpose of knowing the cost of each activity and where do the costs come from. Again, each activity must basically require man, machine, and of course material. And each of these man, machine, and material do have a particular rate in terms of salary, in terms of the weight of the material price, and then even the machine, you need to basically purchase. Even you purchase, you need to calculate the daily rate, whatever. If you basically rent, of course, you are going to pay more. So those kind of things you have learned in the previous class. And then there is another element, plus profit. So this unit rate of material, man, and machine, normally in the tender document, the contractor basically come up with those kind of things. And we can use that rate in order to calculate how much cost that we need to execute activity A, B, C, etc., etc. So that is how those costs basically being derived. Okay. Then after you know this kind of costs, you can basically proportionate them, put a weightage, or you can do a cumulative figure, meaning to say item number one, you add with item number two, for instance, this is 1,600, and then this is 3,600, and then etc. etc. This 9,600. At the end of the day, you are going to get the cumulative amount. And you can use this cumulative amount, convert those things into percentage. For instance, 1,600 divided by 2,000 and 20,000 times with 100%, then you can get the percentage. And this percentage, you can translate into what we call a graph that looks like this. This is the end of the project. This is the graph. All these values based on whatever interval that you choose. This is the cost, for instance, or you can tabulate. And this is what we call financial S-curve. This financial S-curve is what we basically refer to. This is just example. And where does this financial S-curve come from? From the scheduling, from the bar chart. So that's why bar chart is needed, or planning scheduling is needed first. Then only we can come up with this kind of indicator. Either we call it financial S-curve, or we can call it physical S-curve. This is what we call physical. The differences between financial and physical S-curve is based on what are the elements that we refer to. Where do we get this figure? Basically from the duration, remember? So physical S-curve basically refer to the duration of each activity that we can convert into percentage. Whereas financial S-curve, we can use the cost and then we can convert into the duration. At the end of the day, we are going to end up with what we call physical S-curve. Those physical S-curve and financial S-curve is the indicator that we can use in tracking and controlling. We are going to learn those things at the end of the semester in monitoring and controlling subject per se. But now we just basically explain the connection first. What is the planning and scheduling is all about? Okay, so we already demonstrate this issue and this issue, and another example, you see, this one. So whatever S-curve that you have, either financial or physical, will normally looks like this. The red in color, this is what we call the original. Whereas the blue color, the dotted line, you can use whatever color that you want, is the actual progress. The actual progress can only be plotted. This is what we call the process of monitoring. The process of monitoring will result in the plotting of this actual progress. But we are not going to plot when the project basically finished. We are going to plot along the way. So that's why if you are very familiar with the construction project, you did your LI, isn't it? Even though it was very short, if basically you pay full attention, you can get the most, even though your duration could be very short, like 10 weeks only. But if you are very observant, you can basically learn the whole process in a short period of time, because those kind of process will repeat after itself. So those are the things that you will come across when you start working. The only differences is the nature of the project, but the process is the same. Okay. So let's say when you plot let's say first week, this is what we call, or first month, using the first month, you notice that the line is basically behind progress, behind the original plan, meaning to say the project is lagging behind. And then by right, it basically trigger a concern by project manager and the team. Oh, we are running short of the progress by how many percent? So each of the item here indicate certain values you can calculate. Okay, if we are using a computer software, all the thing will be given to us. We don't have to calculate anyway. But in the class, we need to learn the fundamental, so that you understand how to interpret things, how to develop things. And if, for instance, the computer show very funny result, you can go back and trace, oh, okay, these are the issues. That is the why we need to learn about fundamentals. And then you notice that we are running late. So project manager and the team by right should come up with what we call recovery plan. Recovery planning to say how to catch up with the original plan. Otherwise, if, for instance, project basically do nothing, at the end of the day, we expect that this graph, if we continue, you notice that the project can still finish, but it is going to be extended, which basically nobody is going to like, especially the client. Okay, if you persistently doing these kind of things, well, I can assure you, this would be your last project anyway, okay? Because client basically expect you to be completed on time. Little bit extra based on whatever good reason is acceptable, but this is too much already. That is the purpose. Okay, lastly, is about claim. This is another one. Okay, in construction industry, it is a global practice. You need to do the work first, then only you can submit your claim. Your claim then will be verified by people at the construction site, okay? Especially the what we call club of work, or the consultant at the construction site, they are there, so they need to verify. So how do they verify? They are going to verify by looking at the real things. They are going to verify by looking at the document that you submitted. So that's why when you submitted progress claim, it must come with all kind of evidence. What are those evidence? Example, the work program, the bar chart. You need to submit the bar chart like this. The bar will basically have two, you notice there are two bar for each task. One indicate the what we call baseline, and the blue color basically indicate the real thing, the actual versus the original. Then we can make comparison. Then basically we know by looking at the graphic, basically people who might not be at the construction site basically can understand. That is the purpose of having this kind of graphic in order to show the progress that you have made, so that people can basically verify the claim and pay you accordingly. And the client normally is not going to ask very much, because they basically trusted the consultant that they already hired. It is the consultant that are at the construction site most of the time. They basically should know what is going on. But in order to make it official, all kind of claim have to be supported with the evidence. So evidence are, for instance, the progress bar chart, the PDM diagram, and all kind of things which could be related to the scheduling again. So that is the purpose of having the scheduling. Okay. Planning allows us to develop framework for project execution, monitoring, and control. Of course, if you want to execute things, you must have something. You must basically come up with the proper thinking first. What to do, where, who is going to get involved, etc., etc. So you already done your planning, the thinking process, and then basically you put into some kind of graphic. That is what we call scheduling, in order for everybody to know. So that you must remember, in modern construction, there are a lot of people will get involved. There are many subcontractors, there are many suppliers, there are many people that will need to know when they need to come in. So the best thing basically to represent whatever your thought process into a proper graphic, so that people know when to come in, okay, to do the work. This is what we call execution. Okay, then come the monitoring and control. So if, for instance, we just execute things and we could not be bothered with monitoring and control, then basically nobody know what is going on with this project. People need to know the progress, because if you are investor investing billion and billion dollar of your money, the purpose of you invest basically to generate more money. So you need to know how much that you have spent, and to what extent the project basically completed, because you need to know when basically you can start generating money, because you also have to pay the people who loan you money in order to do to do the project, because sometimes the money could be getting from loan, from banks, from individuals, etc., etc. Okay, so that's why monitoring and control is very important. There is a saying, maybe you have heard about this saying: failing to plan is planning to fail. If, for instance, you are not being bothered by planning, okay, well, you have to wait. One day, for instance, you are going to see the extent of your not very much concern about planning. At the end of the day, a lot of things that you do basically fail because you do not do proper planning. Planning determine, this is what we call 5W and 1H. Among the W, let's say what, when, where, which, we reserve one for the schedule. And then the rest of W we can basically allocate for planning. Remember, planning basically is the overall thinking process. Whereas scheduling, basically, there is one W that we reserve to. Okay, we reserve to scheduling. Planning require visualization. Long time ago, okay, long time ago, when we do not have all this kind of fancy software, people even did their PhD using a basic software. Very simple. The issue of site, construction site. Let's say you have this construction site, then you have the entrance, then you have many things that you need to put inside here, okay, or the casting yard, or the crane, etc., whatever. And one issue is that where to put the tower crane. So you need to basically able to visualize the best position of the tower crane so that the boom can reach to most of the area, so that we might not have so many crane around because the very congested site, for instance. So this is when you need visualization. Nowadays is okay because we do have all kind of graphic that can process very fast, but long time ago, it was very difficult. If, for instance, you arrange badly your construction site, at the end of the day, you are going to somehow it will basically affect your productivity. Just imagine a big truck carrying a big load going into your construction site, and then that truck basically is going to maneuver, going back and forth, trying to unload things and going back. How long it will take? Okay, and there could be many trucks coming in, because in urban area they are going to be restricted timing in terms of your ability to carry heavy load anyway. So that will be the issue. So timing is very important, because that timing will be translated into the overall timing of your project. So that's why it is very important to be able to visualize. Nowadays, with the advanced graphic computer, etc., it basically help a lot. And you need to remember, let's say after you graduate immediately, you basically you try to get a job as a scheduler or planning engineer. We do have our ex-student that got a job being a scheduler, even though he or she might not have experience, but that's okay. You need to start somewhere anyway. But in reality, in order to become a good scheduler or planner, you need to have hands-on experience. You need to be able to see what is going on, because not many things are going to be put into the textbooks, okay? Especially with regard to hands-on experience, okay? And then another thing is with regard to method, construction method. This is again require hands-on experience, okay? You need to understand how thing is going to be executed. Remember the concept of 5 M's? We already mentioned about man, machine, material, and then money. And then another M that basically stands for method, construction method, okay? Method is very important in order to know how we are going to execute things, because it will basically relate to the timing. And timing is the one that's going to affect our overall basically project completion. So that's why method is very important. We choose the right method. And if, for instance, method take a long time, we need to be very creative how we can cut short the things without jeopardizing the quality of things. So it is up to the project team to be creative. But we are talking about the scheduling, how basically the method can affect our scheduling as well, because it is related to the timing, establishing interdependence. In scheduling, this item, we can relate to what we call the term predecessor or successor. Predecessor or successor. The name that we refer to, predecessor, is basically what are the activities that come prior or before such activity. For instance, if we show the activity in terms of A, B, C, we expect that A basically come first, subsequently B. So basically, what activity come before B? Of course, it is A. That is what we call A is the predecessor of B. If we say in the other way around, okay, successor. Successor is basically the activity that come after such activity. For instance, what come after A is basically B. That is the things that normally information that we need in order to connect activity A and B, C, D together. Because at the end of the day, each activity are interconnected. If, for instance, activity A is going to be delayed, and of course, B is going to be delayed as well. Subsequently, it will affect until Z, W, X, Z, the last activity. At the end of the day, project will be basically overdue. That is the things, okay? So in project scheduling, we do have method. We call it network diagram. In network diagram, everything are interrelated together. And how do we recognize those things? Okay, we recognize those things from the concept of WBS, work breakdown structure, what activity are interrelated to others, and at the end of the day, we can know their relationship. Again, this basically require hands-on experience, because books do not basically mention this thing. Okay, once you start working, then you understand. In general, yes. In general, we know in construction what we need to construct first. We can divide into, for instance, site preparation. Okay, one big section, and then substructure, and then superstructure, and then external works. That is a big division of work breakdown structure. But then we can also divide in between those sections, meaning to say subsection. But sometimes when we are dealing with a special project that we might not have the knowledge, this is when hands-on experience are very important. Okay. All right. This is what we call the whole planning process. Okay. The whole planning process can be shown in this diagram. But there is one saying here. You notice here, this is saying by Eisenhower. Eisenhower is one of US president. I think US do have a big ship, battleship named after this guy. All right. So he basically say, plans are nothing. Planning is everything. What does this mean? This thing mean? Plans are nothing. So meaning to say, this is what we call plan. Okay, plan. Well, in order to come up with a plan, it is not that difficult. People, sometimes, I'm not really sure whether when you start working, then you will understand. Normally, when organization want to come up with something, they will gather everybody. Okay, now we want to do this. Okay, throw your ideas. So people will throw ideas here and there, and people who basically talk a lot will normally come up with all kind of ideas, but some of the ideas are very lousy ideas anyway. So what does that thing mean? From those ideas, people can basically gather and put together, and at the end of the day, meeting days, okay, now we already have the plan. Okay, it looks nice. Huh? So that's why plans are easy to come up with once you have all the data. But the most difficult part is not the plan. This issue, this item, okay, this item, implement. When you start implement, then only you will see all kind of issue will crop up. That's why when you do not put a proper thought into planning, so you will notice that you are going to come up with a plan which is not realistic. That at the end of the day, you will keep changing plan. By right, plan should be only one. We do not basically change the plan. We fine tune the plan. That is acceptable. But if you keep changing the plan, meaning to say something is not right somewhere, because the plan itself is basically useless. That's why. Okay, that's why people can basically throw the ideas, and it looks like the plan is okay. Now we do have a plan, but the plan might not be workable. You will notice that when you start to implement, and then you are going to face issue and challenges. If basically you are not a strong-hearted person, basically you will give up. Okay, now we basically retract. We basically scrap this project. That is a failure. Okay, so that's why you need to do a proper plan, realistic plan. You implement and you face issue and challenges. You come up with a creative way. You there might be deviation from the original plan. Never mind. You come up with the what we call you monitor, and you see what could be the impact. If the small things, you just simply let it be like that. But big thing, basically, you need to do something. So you come up with a corrective action, and you fine tune your plan, and then this cycle will go on until the project basically completed. Because the big thing in the planning scheduling, I would say the whole process here, basically this is what we refer to scheduling. The first one is basically planning. It's the thinking process, okay? But the reality is basically when we attach timing, and then we attach all resources, and when the time comes, we need to execute the work, and then only we are going to face all kind of issue and challenges. Key element in planning. Generate, first thing first, generate work breakdown structure and list of activity, WBS. We are going to learn about this thing later on, okay? WBS in subsequent slide anyway, okay, in subsequent slide. And then you will notice what is this WBS is all about, okay? WBS, from this WBS, we'll generate list of activities. Activity, or in scheduling software, we normally call tasks. And then we estimate duration and cost. In the subsequent slide, we will explain how do we estimate duration. And then we determine the logic. This is what we call interdependent. We can use the concept of predecessor or successor, how basically we want to link each activity together, and then draw. This is the one that we are going to learn. Network diagram, okay? But we are going to learn a few scheduling techniques. One of the technique is being called network diagram, namely AOA diagram. And then another one is basically AON, and PDM, okay? PDM diagram. And the bar chart is, we do not call it network diagram, but it is one of the techniques. There are many techniques that we can draw in order for the people who do not do the planning or do not get involved with the planning process can know our thought. That is the whole concept of planning scheduling. People who basically do plan scheduling are different people, but people who are going to execute the work are different people. That is the issue. So now how do you transfer the thought? The best way to transfer the thought is basically putting your thought into on paper using whatever the graphic. This is what the graphic is all about, to represent your thought process. Okay, now we come into distinguishing what is planning and what is scheduling. You see, planning involves making decision with the objective, etc., etc. That's why we call it thinking phases or thinking process. So you can ask many W, what to be done, where, which equipment to be used, who is going to get involved, where is the location, how it is going to be executed, etc., etc. Okay, W and H. But then there is one W that we reserve for the scheduling. We call it when. So when is basically when we allocate the timing, the activity start is when. So that's why when we do scheduling, when we call it scheduling, we are going to come up with the activity, list of activity, then we are going to allocate the activity start time and then activity finish time according to the duration of the activities. That is what scheduling is all about. And the scheduling is what matters the most, because one, we already identify the timing, starting and ending of such activity. When the time comes, we basically should execute the activity. Then only we are going to see all kind of issue coming up. Previously, prior to scheduling is basically the planning. Planning is the thinking process. Let's say, for instance, after this semester, maybe you are going to graduate. Okay, you are going to finish your study. By now, you already have some kind of thinking process, planning. Oh, what you are going to do after you graduate. That is what we call planning or thinking about this, thinking about that. But the time do not come yet. The time only come on whatever after July, August, etc., etc. That is when scheduling is all about. Let's say you already plan, put your thought on whatever on certain date, but when time comes, you need to execute, and that is when scheduling is going to take place, to take into action, and then only we are going to see whether whatever planning that you come up with could be on paper or in your brain, in your mind, for instance, whether it is going to be successful or not. Okay, that is basically the differences between planning and scheduling. But both terms, sometimes people just simply uh, uh, to simplify the conversation. For instance, sometimes people simply say planning. Sometimes people just simply say scheduling. But bear in mind, they mean the both process, because planning without scheduling is basically nothing. Scheduling without planning is also nothing. Okay, so you must understand. In academic, you need to understand a proper what we call a proper word for certain things, but in layman term, people simply say one word that represent many things, isn't it? Okay. All right. What else? So finish on those things. Okay. Now let's go into step into effective time management. Okay. Remember, time management uh, is one of knowledge area. Instead of saying time management, we can say schedule management, because PMI basically use schedule instead of time, because the issue is that time is too abstract, but in layman term, basically both basically refer to the same things. First thing first, examine the contract. Where do you get this contract from? It basically originate from tender document. Remember, the tender document consists of a few items. One of the item could be the BQ, bill of quantities, specification, term and condition. That is what we call contracts, okay, etc., etc. Once the winner, after the tender evaluation, the winner has been identified, then basically the contract has been formed between client and contractor. The original tender document, with perhaps some final tuning or changes, will then be called contract document. Contract document, where contract means to say there is a binding agreement between two parties. So what basically in the contract, it spell out term and condition. So you need to basically, you need to read the contract document, what basically it say, in order to make sure when you basically come up with the scheduling, you do not want to encroach into certain condition which basically could be against the client's wish, etc., etc. So you must basically comply with contractual term and condition. Okay, that would be the first thing. Divide project into major area. This basically you need to do using the concept of the WBS. Okay, and normally when you want to construct schedule, this is a must. And then the work method you need to identify, and then of course you need to identify duration and cost from the concept of productivity calculation, and then you come up with the schedule first. The schedule might not be perfect, never mind, because you need to see the overall output as a result of the schedule. What could be the output? Example of the output could be resource graph. Example, you can only see the resource graph once you put everything into the schedule. Then you figure out the resource, the graph is not good, bad looking graph. Then you are going to revise. That is the purpose. This is what we call schedule adjustment. Okay. We are going to learn this thing a little bit in one of the lecture, namely resource smoothing and leveling after the semester break. Okay. And then this is another example. Once you already adjust your schedule, you have a perfect schedule, for instance, but you never know. Due to whatever things that happen to this world, maybe this time around, because of the war, you need to basically to speed up the project. You cannot basically prolong the project, otherwise the cost will be increased, etc., etc. You want to speed up. This is what this topic is all about. I already mentioned last week, okay, about this. And then total project cash flow. Okay, as a result of scheduling, we can also come up with the project cash flow in terms of the monthly spending. How much you spend and how much is the income going into your pocket. The differences between what you spend and what you receive in terms of payment from the client could be forecasted even at the beginning of the project. Once you have the scheduling completed with all kind of information, and in such a way, it basically helps you to prepare for the worst. Let's say you figure out that, okay, in the month of, I don't know, January next year, for instance, you might be running short of cash from your projected cash flow. And where can we get this projected cash flow from? From our scheduling. You see, scheduling is very important. Without the scheduling, we simply cannot do this. It is very difficult. Okay. So those are the things. At the end of the day, so planning scheduling is not just simply come out with the bar chart or the arrow diagram or the PDM diagram. Okay, now we are done. No, there are many, many things after that. Okay, there are many, many things that that basically can help us. So that's why planning is the heart of a good project management, and it can be used as a tools to monitor project, to better manage our resources, cash flow, manpower, etc., etc. Okay, why people fail in planning? First, lack of commitment to planning. Well, even though we know planning is very important, but we need to get a proper support. Let's say, um, when you start working, for instance, your boss want you to take care of the scheduling because they do not have any scheduler, planner, etc. Okay, that's good. But in order to be a good scheduler or planner, you need to have a good knowledge and skill, especially about in the software, for instance. You need to learn about Microsoft Project and Primavera. And how to learn those things? You can, the good thing, the best thing to learn is basically by going for courses conducted by professional people who basically have experience from the construction side. That is the best way to learn. Well, you can learn from the YouTube here and there, but that is not a proper method. But in order to go for courses, you need to have money. I see. This is the issue. When the boss are not committed to let you learn, do not give a proper budget to the software, to the hardware, training, etc., etc. At the end of the day, you are not going to get the most out of this planning scheduling. Failure to develop and implement sound strategy. Once you do the planning, remember the difficult part is basically to implement. To implement, you need to come up with the strategy because things could be changing. Every time things change, every time we are going to have this kind of situation with a hike in fuel prices, it will basically affect our way of doing things, especially in the construction industry. So how basically project manager and team come up with the strategy in order to minimize the impact? That could be issues that need creativity. Lack of meaningful objective and goal. Every planning basically start with the certain KPI. KPI meaning to say key performance indicator. What you want to achieve. So you must be very clear. Otherwise, you are going to have a very bad planning, for instance, by not fulfilling what you basically wish for because you do not have a clear KPI. Okay, failure to see scope of plan. Everything basically need to be to have a scope. So that's why in Project Management Institute, at the beginning of our slide, Project PMI emphasize on the scope. You see, emphasize on the scope. Even though in a simpler term, time, cost, and quality has been used as a triple constraint for a very long time, but PMI choose to embed scope because everything basically starts from the scope. Remember, in the tender document or contract document, at the beginning of the page, it will start with the scope of work. Client expect you to do the work according to the scope. If, for instance, you do not understand the scope of work, you do things according to what you think it is good, at the end of the day, people might not pay you because they do not ask you to do that. Okay. Failure to see planning as rational process. So planning basically, even though they do have some kind of forecasting element, but it need to be basically backed up with a concrete evidence, data, etc., etc. from the previous experience, for instance, you can execute certain work with this kind of project team, with this kind of resources, it could be possible. That is what we call rational process. It is not to say something that you simplify things. Okay, you simplify things. For instance, what we are having a problem right now, I don't know, work from home. Well, if for instance a few sector only work from home, the rest are basically work as normal. I don't know whether we can have subsequent saving or not, whether it is going to be effective or not. It is not that comprehensive because we thought, okay, if we can do this, that is very simplified. Okay, excessive reliance on experience. What does this thing mean actually? It basically mean too complacent. What does too complacent mean? Too complacent mean overconfident. Overconfident in such a way, okay, we have done this project many times. We can turn into a blind eyes and then the project could be done in a very fast time. That is what is basically overconfident. Remember what we tell you in I think in maybe slide number 1 or 2, I don't remember, or number 3, about the characteristic of the project. One characteristic of the project, we call it unique nature. What does that unique nature mean? Unique nature mean project do not duplicate after itself. What does that thing mean? It simply means that even though, let's say we want to construct KLCC, the same KLCC in Kuala Lumpur, in Johor, for instance, the same height, the same design, the same kind of material, etc., etc. Well, you can do that, but of course, constructing those things in different type of land or construction site will have different challenges. As simple as that. Even though it looks like the project are similar in nature, but then you are going to experience totally new things. This is what this thing is all about. Okay, so we need to say expect for the worst. And then lack of management support in terms of the budget, into the training, in terms of many things. And sometimes people say planning is very important, yes, but then they do not fully support. It is not simply rhetoric. Rhetoric means to say, okay, we agree, planning is very important, but then when it comes to implementation, people don't care. It is very similar. It is very similar. Every organization do a strategic planning and strategic management. Sometimes they bring everybody to the big hotel to have the strategic management as if, well, I agree, the strategic management planning is very important, but if you do not know the fundamental, how to execute things, at the end of the day, it is going to be very rhetoric in such a way everybody can throw ideas, but the ideas might not be realistic. They do not basically link to the existing resources that they have. If they want to add resources, that would be good, but most of the time, resources is the main issue. You need basically to come up with a proper planning using whatever resources that you have. If you need extra budget, make sure that budget that you wish for can be released by the management. Otherwise, your strategic management is going to go down into drain. Lack of clear delegation. Once we plan, remember we do have organizing. What does organizing basically refer to? Organizing basically, most of the time will refer to people. We need to identify people. Why? Because we need to delegate the works. Whatever work that we plan, we need to delegate to people. That's why we need to identify the people. Okay, we need to identify the people who is basically a person in charge, and then who would be the supervisor, who would be the subordinates. At the end of the day, we know who to find if something is not in accordance to our KPI. If something is basically slow, we know where to trace, and we know who is going to be answerable. And that is what organizing is all about. But when you delegate the work, it has to be fair. Some people get the most work with the same salary, whereas some people basically get less. Then it will create all kind of issues. One of the issues is basically people tend to be demotivated. Why? Some people are getting more work, do all the work most of the time with the same salary, but some people who basically are very good to the boss simply do nothing, get the same salary, and sometimes get more also. That is the issue. Lack of adequate control technique. Remember, monitoring and control. We can monitor, yes, but oftentimes people do not come out with a what we call project recovery plan. What does project recovery plan? Basically, the action taken. If the project is running late, what shall we do? So you need to come up with a proper control technique or corrective action. Then only you are going to manage to catch up with whatever the original plan. And lastly, resistant to change. Well, if project is running late, what does this thing mean? Meaning to say, in the subsequent week or month, you must basically not only walk, you must run. Meaning to say, you have to double up work, double up or triple up or whatever. So you must work extra. This is the issue. How basically you want to let people to change from the normal way of doing things into a faster way of doing things. It's very difficult. So this is what resistance to change is all about. So management need to understand the concept of change management. There are whole books about change management. Normally in the master degree program, we do teach a little bit subject about this thing. They could have a proper technique, way to do things, etc., etc., in order to basically cope with this issue. Okay. All right. So this is the first topic of the day. Okay. Okay. So now let me go back to these things.